Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Stripped by SWer, your podcast for strippers, sex workers, and all the fancy naked people in between. I am your host, SWer, aka Kimchi on stage. I am currently on stage at the time of recording and probably will be back on stage by the time this is released. You can find me at Shaker's Show Lounge in Surrey if you find yourself here in the West Coast in the Vancouver Lower Mainland area. Come chat with me about the show. I love when people do that. It's like super fun. I'm like, yay, come get a dance for me, but you really just want to chat with me, which has happened before, and I love that. I've also dabbled in other forms of sex work as well. If you've been listening to the show, you would know that I was a former sugar baby a long time ago. Did that for a few years. I'm an OnlyFans model, and I have some other things that I can't announce yet, but hopefully soon. Yeah, you'll just have to keep staying tuned because I have some big news coming up. I just need to wait to get the okay to release that information. But yeah, I've been doing the show the past 3 years. We're now in season 5, which is super exciting. So thank you to everyone listening. Thank you to Skyhawk After Dark. It's an amazing adult industry network that houses a lot of different adult industry related podcasts. Shout out to them. Also, shout out to my Patreon subscribers. Hello to Snoo out in Germany. We have Jay Sunstern here in BC in Canada. Same with Rip Sarkar and Justin Erickson all the way from, not all the way, but just down in the States in Oregon. Thank you so much. Y'all are in the top tier of my Patreon, so you get a shout out here on air, which is super exciting. There are different tiers you can kind of take a look if you're interested in supporting the show. I've been working on my website for a little bit, and that's where your money's going. And one day to upgrade my equipment. So thank you to everyone for your support. It's been an amazing 3 years and really rad 4 seasons that I've been doing every single week for the past 3 years. So thank you. I'm really excited to bring this week's guest onto the show today. We were actually meant to be recording an episode 2 years ago, but what happened was the pandemic happened, things shut down. It was a different kind of episode that we had planned. She is an amazing pole dancer, competitor, exotic dancer, amazing human being overall. And I'm so excited to talk about her new journey and the shift that we are doing with the episode today. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce the audience to Miss Jenna Elissa. Hello and welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so happy when you're like, we're overdue for an episode. We should do it now. I'm like, there's really no time like the present. So thank you so much for having me on.
I mean, there's really not a lot of time because you are 39 weeks at the time of recording and about to pop.
Yeah. Yes, hopefully, honestly, sooner than later. But yeah, hopefully I don't have like 2 more weeks stretching ahead of me, but it's really hard to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, having stuff like this to do is actually beneficial. So I was happy to make it happen.
Yay. And as long as you don't go into labor over the next hour, that would be great. Because that would be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what we've learned from, usually it's not as dramatic or fast as it happens in the movies. Mm-hmm. Like labor could start and I would barely know. And I definitely would still have time to finish the podcast before it was even really like stopping me in my tracks. So should be okay.
Totally. Well, Jenna, it's so great to have you on the show today. I'd love to flip it back to you in terms of like defining who you are. I mean, I know you a little bit because, backstory, back it up. So I know you from the pole dancing world. We're both, I'm not competing anymore, but who knows if that will change. But I knew you from the pole dancing, like competing world, and you were doing a lot of competitions, and I specifically remember you, I think it was the 2017 CPFA in Toronto. I think you went to that one, right?
2018.
2018? Yeah, 2018. Yeah, that's correct. And I just remember meeting you really briefly because I was like, oh my god, it's like so exciting, there's so many people here, I can't wait to watch everyone's performances. And I just watched you go on and I was like, holy fucking shit. Like this girl has got some power. And like I remember seeing in other competitions as well. And I just remember seeing her name and I'm like, I really fucking hope I'm not in the same category as her because she's like gonna kick my ass. But yeah, I've always enjoyed your performances and stuff, and like you bring so much power and creativity in all of your shows, and like just truly, truly a joy to watch, and just amazing, true professional. Yeah, so that's how I know you.
Thank you so much. That's very sweet of you to say. Yeah, it's so funny because when we watch back our own performances from that many years ago, we're like kind of cringing at ourselves a lot of the time. Like I'm sure if I watched that performance from 2018, I'd be like, oh my God. But thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Yeah. I had like an intense in terms of like a high volume of competitions, but in a short-lived period of time because again, the pandemic kind of not cut it short because I mean it will come back the competitions, but when you say you're not competing, there haven't been any competitions in Canada since the pandemic started until pole theater this year. So we haven't, unless we were going to travel, we haven't really had the chance. So
exactly. Yeah, and like I'm not counting virtual competitions. I'm personally not into that. Like I still don't like the crowd's not there, the energy's not there. You could record your best run through, and I just feel like that's not fair personally. So it's a different world that we live in now, but they should be coming back, I think, pretty soon. So but yeah, sorry, back to you. That's like a complete side tangent, sidebar. But yeah, going back to you, how would you define yourself? I know some people hate that question, some people love it. But again, I really think it's important to give all of my guests the opportunity to define who they are in their own words and terms. So feel free to go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard question because it's like the definition shifts over time. And the pandemic and then also pregnancy has challenged like my definition of myself, how much of that is defined externally, if that makes sense, versus defined like more internally, what stays constant. But I definitely would say I'm a pole dancer. I was actually, so I'm a pole dancer, pole competitor. I still class that as part of like my identity, even though I haven't had the chance to compete for a little bit. Pole instructor and stripper, exotic dancer. And again, although I'm not doing that right this second, I still see it as like part of my identity, I guess, and how I would define myself. I now am a mom to be, which is part of how I would define myself. And that's the biggest shift, I guess. I'm like, I don't want to say a metalhead. I guess a metalhead. I love
You are.
like
You are.
old school classic heavy metal and classic rock. And I have a pretty actually narrow music taste. So that like definitely like shapes kind of my extracurricular activities or activities outside of pole as well. But yeah, I guess I'm a dog mom. I'm like kind of sad that they're not going to be my only babies anymore. I'm like savoring these last like couple weeks with just them and a wife. So
yes,
yeah.
amazing.
But like I said, that's a lot of that's external, right? Like those are like the roles you fill and they're not necessarily constant. Like some things are more constant than others. It's kind of a philosophical conversation to say like how much of your identity is like stable to you versus like the activities you do. So I don't know.
No, that's like such an interesting point because excuse me. Like during the pandemic, I had a huge realization that like I was attaching myself, my identities to all these external things like you mentioned, like because so many things had shut down during that time, like clubs were closed, studios were closed. I don't have a pole at home, so I couldn't even do that. Like and just like going to work and like those are things I defined myself by. And then I was just like, well, who am I at my core? And I really like questioned that because I just attached myself to basically being a workaholic. And I was like, no, I'm more than that. Like I have interests, I have like other things that I have going for me that's not just attached to work stuff. So, and we will be talking a lot on this episode, like about something you quote on your podcast. Oh, I forgot to mention, Jenna's also the host of a fantastic new podcast called the Dancer Mama Podcast. And a term that you had used in one of your episodes, I think it was like episode 2, was you were speaking about like identity shifts as opposed to like identity loss. I really would love to hear what you meant by that. Like, of course, I listened to your episodes, I know, but like in terms of like what you have been experiencing. But I'm already kind of jumping past everything. I feel like we should start chronologically and start in the beginning in terms of like how you got started in sex work, how you started stripping, and then we can talk about pregnancy and then going from there.
Yeah. So I actually was a pole dancer first before I became a sex worker. So in 2016, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. 2016, took my first ever pole class at a local studio here. And I talked a little bit about this on my own podcast, but like when you try pole for the first time, I feel like it's either like, oh, that was a fun bucket list thing, or you're like, oh, that was kind of cool, or you're like hooked, like love at first spin. And I was right from the beginning, I was like good at the dancing part. Like the dancing part came naturally to me, but anything to do with hanging onto the pole was such a struggle. I'm plagued with like the most sweaty, slippery hands. Like I'm one of those. I would never say that. I mean, pole grip is a crutch, but it's like a necessary crutch for me. And I would never like shame anyone for using it because I literally couldn't pull without it. But even though it wasn't readily apparent that I was going to be good at it, I was so hooked. And so I was taking lessons, eventually bought my pole at home, which that usually like propels a person's progress once they can start training at home, training more frequently.
Totally.
Yeah, I was in school at the time doing a sociology degree. And the longer that I was pole dancing, the less interested in school I became. And there was other factors there too. But I ended up dropping out of my degree with only 7 courses left at the beginning of 2017, like going to that next semester. I was like, this just isn't working for me. 1 or 2 more semesters, I don't care how long it is. It's like my time is more valuable than doing something making me miserable.
Yeah.
So I was a waitress at the time. Like most of my work history is like being a waitress at like Irish pubs and stuff. So I was a waitress, but like money was kind of tight. I was in school, dropped out of school. I was also like struggling with alcoholism at the time. And all these things kind of came to a crux. I dropped out, stopped drinking initially for a month, but now it's been 5 years. But anyway, and then I decided I'm not making enough money. I wanted to be performing. And I'm like, how can I make money performing? The strip club. So I actually went to a local club here in Calgary that has go-go dancers as well as like main stage girls. And I started as a go-go dancer. That just seemed more appealing to me at the time. And I loved it. It was super fun. It really like furthered my, like, not my pole training. I always say that people who perform pole for a living, you're always performing and never training. So you get really good at the things that like you're good at, and then you're not like training new things, but that's like a whole other story. So I was a go-go dancer and was just like being in the club environment and loved it. It was a similar lifestyle to waitressing in the fact that like working at night, I've like always worked at night and I love that. I love having my days to myself. I'm not bothered about giving up a nightlife because you're working in the nightlife anyway. So, and watching the main stage girls, admiring them, getting used to the club environment. And then that fall, so worked for about like maybe 8 months as a go-go dancer, and then had the opportunity to start working on stage and like on the floor. So doing stage shows here and there and like selling dances.
Right. Wow. That's
Yeah.
interesting because, like, um, I also had a similar journey as well. Like, I was one of those people that started off with pole, and I know that either I've talked about this too. There's a whole like debate between like pole hobbyists now and strippers and stuff, and there's some people that like shame some of us with our beginnings, and I just feel like, have you ever had anyone shame you for that before because you weren't a stripper first before pole?
Yeah, that's really interesting too, because I'm definitely very aware of that conversation that's like happening in like the sex worker community and the pole community. And
Mm-hmm.
for a long time it was like, well, I don't know, but I guess it was like pole athletes or pole hobbyists like maybe shaming sex workers or strippers. But then for you
Yeah.
to ask me, have I been shamed for having the alternate origins? Because, yeah, even sometimes like the messaging I see on Instagram, I feel like it takes it a little bit far and it actually can
Yeah.
like deepen this perceived divide. Um,
Mm-hmm.
no, I've never had anyone like say anything directly to me about it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, like
I
nothing
don't know.
even to me too, like nothing to me personally, but like I see these conversations, I observe that these conversations are happening, and I just feel like it is dangerous.
Yeah, if we like I'm having a hard time like organizing my thoughts around this, but definitely I think it was like a positive like development in the sense of acknowledging the origins of pole and the origins
Mhm.
of like exotic dancing and dancing in heels and destigmatizing sex work. Like that's really important ongoing conversation, and I love that the pole community is becoming a lot more open to that. Like the studio I work at in Calgary that I teach at has three at least, yeah, three strippers as instructors and lots of like exotic dancers and sex workers that come and take classes there. And it's like never a secret, you know, I mean, unless someone wants it to be a secret for themselves. But like I think that destigmatizing sex work is a really important part of that conversation. But I
Mhm.
think we have to acknowledge the pole world as well for what they're doing, especially even internationally, and how much further they take like the athletic and artistic side of the sport itself. And that like it's kind of like it's a circular thing, like in and
Totally.
out of the club, like in the pole community. And I don't think either side should be like shamed or elevated or like lowered
Totally.
in status. And I don't
Mhm.
think that like the achievements of like the pole fitness and pole competition scene should be taken away from either, personally. But
Yeah. Like I feel like both of these worlds can exist and we are products of that. Um and I think it's just really important to not contribute to this divide. I know this question is like completely out of left field, but I was curious to hear like what your thoughts were on that. So thank you for sharing. Because like there's just no one, like I never meet anyone that has the same shares like the same kind of beginnings as we did. So
Mhm.
just interesting.
Yeah.
But shifting back to the conversation, tell us about your journey with pregnancy because I think it was before I had heard on your show that you weren't even planning to have children initially.
Yeah, I wasn't. So, I mean, I'll sorry, I'm going to backtrack and talk a little bit more about my stripper journey. I kind of
Oh, please,
like
yeah.
so I was working at only clubs in Calgary. So, I was
Mhm,
only working at clubs in Calgary like as a house dancer um
mhm.
for like a year and a half, and it was awesome. I loved being a dancer. Uh was single for a really long time, and I kind of thought I think I had some like internalized horophobia or just some like latent like self-worth issues that were kind of like stirred up with by that, where I thought
Yeah.
I really love my life. I'm like training pole in the studio, I'm performing every night, I'm making good money finally, I feel happy, but I don't think that the kind of person I would want to be with would be interested in someone like me. And I really don't like saying that
Mhm.
even now because it I don't want to think that I was externalizing that onto strippers in general, because I knew there was lots of dancers who have like successful relationships that look all different ways. It was really about me, and just like previous experiences with men, I guess, like just romantically, like not even in the club or anything. But I did meet someone, and we were dating, and he knew right off the bat that I was a stripper, and he never had an issue with it and never intended to ask me to stop. I think that's a very important component of dating a sex worker. Don't ask her to stop doing what she's doing.
Never do that, please.
Yes, like, yeah, you have to be secure enough in yourself, and like if she's already doing sex work when you meet her, you have no right to ask her to change jobs for you. So, yeah.
100%. Yeah, I can't agree more with that.
Yeah. Cuz that's where like some relationships can turn really toxic. Like some sad stories that I've heard, like with girls dealing with like their relationships, and it makes me sad.
Yeah, all too
Yeah.
common, honestly.
Mhm. But yeah. Anyway, I started working with independent artist agency and started traveling. So I was doing mostly the Alberta like circuit, they call it, I guess, like Red Deer, Grand Prairie, like Lethbridge, like all those clubs. And I loved it even more. Like the traveling dancer lifestyle is like kind of, it has its own challenges, but there was so much about it that I loved. I loved like mixing up where I was working, and like the chance to be on the road and have like alone time, even though it's sad to leave your boyfriend and your dogs, but I really enjoyed those weeks on the road as well. And I feel like it did make me a better dancer. I was start upgrading my costumes, and you're just seeing like fresh performers all the time, and you're feeling inspired, and different audiences trying out different music. So really loved that aspect of my like dancing career, like from 2019 on. Um, and yeah, I mean, this is kind of a winding story, right? Because then it gets into the pandemic, but we all know how that was. Like clubs were shut down, clubs were open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like with the traveling aspect, and I haven't done a lot of that. Like I just like with my current work situations, like it's more beneficial for me to stay at home within Vancouver, which works out for me personally. But I've heard so many great stories about traveling around, because there's like we have our own circuit here in BC, and then a lot of the girls I know have also danced in Alberta, in Brandon, Manitoba as well, and also just like going out to Ontario, and like it just sounds like so much fun. And as a person that just loves to travel, like in my own personal life, like and being able to combine those two just sounds like a dream.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to like glamorize it more than it is, because you're not really traveling to the most like glamorous locations like in the
No,
Alberta circuit, but there's still something about that lifestyle that I really enjoyed. But yeah.
totally.
Hmm.
So bring us
But I feel like
back.
I
I
was
mean,
derailing your conversation.
no, it's okay. I'm really rusty. Like I haven't podcasted all summer, so I feel like I'm super, super rusty. But I mean, like past the pandemic, let's fast forward to your pregnancy journey, and just like
Hmm.
again, not wanting kids originally, and then where did that shift for you? Because you're obviously pregnant now, so.
Hmm. Yeah. So when I met my now husband, who I had just mentioned, that I met him at a time when I thought I had kind of like almost ruined myself for like a quality relationship, I guess, which is kind of sad to think of, that I thought that way. But um, right away when we met, like on our like second date, he didn't like ask me if I wanted to have kids, but like I can't remember if we just saw like someone walking by with a baby or something, and he said, um, "Oh, babies are weird," and I was so excited because I did not want to have kids. I felt like I didn't like kids. I felt like they were annoying to be around. I know that sounds so terrible, but and I never saw a future for myself where I would like give up my autonomy and just make that lifestyle. I just didn't want kids. So when he said, "Oh, babies are weird," I'm like, "Oh my God, major score. He doesn't want to have kids." And I'm like, "Oh, you don't want to have kids?" And he was like, "I do. I just wish they came out like 5 years old, like at the fun age." And I was like,
No.
"Oh, okay." And so we literally like weren't even dating. We had hung out like 3 times. So I didn't really make anything of it. But over the next few months, he would like drop it here and there. Like it just was a very apparent that like he wanted to have kids. And I would usually just respond with like silence kind of. Until one day he said very explicitly, like, I'm going to be a father. Like it's very important to me. It's like a non-negotiable pretty much part of like my future. And I said, I don't want to have kids. And he was like, I know. Because he could tell like from how our conversations had gone that I did not feel the same way.
Yeah.
So
gosh.
most relationship like resources that you would look up would say that's kind of like a deal breaker, right? To like when both people know what they want when it comes to kids and it doesn't match, you're kind of only setting yourself up for like eventual like heartbreak or like a compromise that is not going to feel very good either way.
Right.
Yeah. So that was really hard because when we had that conversation, we were on like holiday, like our first trip we took together to Toronto. And when I came back, I said to my sister, I'm like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? And my sister also really did not like kids. She still doesn't like kids. And she's like, well, you know what you have to do. Like, what are you going to, there's only one thing you can do. But I don't know. And I feel like a bit almost hesitant to tell this story because I mean, I'm like anticipating how people will hear it and people can hear it however they want. But I didn't want to just break up with him. I saw like a lot of other aspects to him and like to our relationship that I wanted to like keep exploring, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess he did too, because you could say the onus was just as much on him to potentially like end it if he felt like, okay, this is not going to be something we can like meet on. But he also did not break up with me. Yeah. So we continued dating and we would kind of like talk about it. And I would ask him to really like break it down, like why he wanted to be a father. And his reasons were very like pure and compelling, I guess. And I mean, no one should be asked to defend their decision, like whether they want kids or don't want kids. But I was just curious, right? Like, is it just something you feel like you should do, right? Because that's a lot of people kind of feel that pressure that it's just something that they should be doing. But that was not his case. He was a lot more intentional about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess just in the course of us continuing to stay together for the next few years, we both, he was, I guess, taking the risk that I was like opening my heart and mind enough to the idea of having kids. I don't know. It's a weird one. And then I don't know. I could get myself really excited about having kids, like when I would think about certain things or like see other people's experience with kids, like on social media or whatever. I don't know that many people with young children in my life personally right now, but and listening to parenting podcasts. Even though I still had doubts, I was started listening to like fertility podcasts and all these like parenting podcasts. And I was like, it sounds so nice. Wow. And I could like really get myself on board with the idea. But then I would look at my current life and the thought of how much it would change and what I would give up. And I would like clam up and be like, oh my God, why?
Yeah.
So
that's a huge thing because it's a big decision, first of all, but also like you had to realize and reflect on how much this is going to change your life. Because like, well, when you're a stripper, like you won't be able to do that temporarily for a certain amount of time. Same as like instructing and dancing and competing as well. So it was, I'm sure, a really, really hard decision to make.
Yeah, and yeah, it just feels like a lot more of a sacrifice for the mom in the short, like
Mm-hmm.
in the initial, like in actually bearing, birthing, and then the early raising of the children. Like, no matter how
Yes.
involved the dad is, it's just not a sacrifice that he physically can make in that
Yeah.
like context. So, and he knew that, you know, and he would say, sometimes he'd be like, if I could do it, I would do it, you know? And I was like, okay. I mean, it's like something when you offer something that's impossible, but it still was nice, the sentiment behind it. But
Totally.
anyway, yeah. And then as time was wearing on, like I was like approaching turning 30, and I was kind of thinking like this would probably be the right time to try
Mm-hmm.
to have a baby. And I also had it in my mind from listening to like a lot of fertility podcasts that it could take some time, because I had heard all these women's stories, and their stories are very different. Like, this is partially why I started my podcast, because a lot of the motherhood stories, it's like a woman who's always, always wanted to be a mom. And it's like kind of one of her most treasured dreams. And that's really beautiful. And then sometimes a story would be like, that's what she wants most. And it is difficult, right? Like fertility
Yeah.
struggles, or like, you know, loss, or how, whatever twist that road takes for them. And I'd listened to a lot of those stories just from like listening to podcasts. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, oh, it could take some time. And so when I was eventually took the initiative to say to him, like, maybe we should like try this month, um, we were super blessed that that was the only month required. So it did not take the time I thought it might take, which again, we're super blessed, but that like cut my dancing time even shorter than I thought. Cause I thought, oh, we got a couple more months. Like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're kind of like thrown into the fire that way, because like I'm sure you're trying to anticipate like this will take a little bit longer, you'll have more time to save money and stuff too, because like that's a huge thing, is like that whole huge income loss that comes with being pregnant, because especially as dancers, we have to be there physically, and also we're outputting a lot of energy with our shows on stage. Like, I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit as well.
Mhm. So whether it's because of a lockdown, like during the pandemic, or an injury, or being pregnant, whatever reason, a dancer has to step away from working at the club. That's not like a choice. It's kind of like a constrained choice. It's a loss of income and a loss of identity. For me, that's how I
Mhm.
see it. And that's how I've experienced it. Because, and the income loss alone is like emotionally triggering for me after 2 years of rolling lockdowns and like losing out on months and months of like my full-time work, and
Yeah.
not really replacing it with anything that was comparable, both
Yeah.
comparable in terms of the income and the fulfillment. Um, so, and I kind of like, when we would talk about, oh, we're going to start a family eventually, I would say like, oh, should I try to transition into a different career, like a career or a job? I don't even know. I'm like one of those dancers who doesn't really want a different job at this time. And when I try to think like, oh, what else could I do? I kind of come up short and get frustrated. Even during the same with the lockdowns, right? I'm like, I don't really want to be doing anything else.
Yeah.
But I would be like, oh, should I transition into like an office job, receptionist, anything that I could do while I was pregnant, like up until like the 8th month or something, and then get maternity leave? But that didn't happen. So I didn't have a maternity leave. I mean, I've been on like a maternity leave, like just unpaid. I just haven't been working for a long time. Um, so yeah, and with a loss of income can come a loss of like self-worth for some people, like in this society that values money and like productivity so highly. When you're not providing for yourself and like contributing in that way, it can take a hit on your self-worth as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Totally. It's a lot. I
yeah.
mean, like, and not just with that,
Yeah.
but like going through like body dysmorphia, the bloatedness you had like when you were dancing still like while on stage, like, and just like not feeling like quote unquote sexy, like that can be really hard too. Like, did you want to touch on that part? Touch on that part?
Yeah. Yeah. So I listened to your episode with Sasha Bell, um, which talked about like motherhood a little bit as well. And I loved listening to her story. That was an amazing episode. But even now, even though I'm like about to have my baby, I still heard her story and compared myself to her. She danced till she was 18 weeks. And I'm like, why couldn't I have danced longer? I stopped dancing at like 6 or 7 weeks. And I had intended, I'm like, from how I understood pregnancy to be before becoming pregnant, I'm like, oh, you don't start showing till like 3 or 4 months in. Like, I'll be able to keep dancing and keep making money a little bit longer. And like some other dancers who are moms who I'd like worked with regularly in Alberta would share their perspective, and they're like, I danced till I was almost 5 months, like till I was really showing like I didn't
Wow.
care, like you'll be able to dance that long too. And like I couldn't, or maybe I could have. And I
Mm-hmm.
keep thinking, like, could I have pushed through and done a few more weeks? It's completely irrelevant now. Like, why torture yourself by thinking back like that? But
Totally.
um, I, I did get morning sickness, so I wasn't feeling well. I was super, super bloated. And looking back, I'm like, probably no one else really would have noticed. Like, customers probably wouldn't have like made anything of that. But for me, I did not see myself the same, and I was not happy. And more than anything, I just instantly did not feel sexy and was not able to like sexualize myself in the way that like that type of work required.
Right.
So that's kind of what played into me deciding to leave the club like so much earlier than I thought. I just thought,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is going to be enjoyable. And
Right.
I don't know. It felt like the right choice at the time. And like someone I was talking to for my podcast, she was talking about pole specifically, but she said something that I just love, that like it's better to miss something than to resent it. And so I've been really
Mm-hmm.
thinking about that. Like, is it better to stop doing something and miss it than, or push through and start resenting it and make yourself miserable doing it? So I think maybe that could apply.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Because you don't want to get
Yeah.
into that side of resenting something, because you might not even come back after that, and then you're gonna have it sours your experience, you know,
Mhm.
and can kind of
Yeah.
potentially ruin that as well.
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, looking back, I can't really say if I made like the right choice or not because it's kind of not relevant. But I missed the club right away. Like as soon as I stopped doing it, and like I was kind of touching on, it's like more than just the income loss. That's definitely part of it. But um, like when you make your living on stage, like it's often more than just the money to you. Like how I was saying, I didn't really want to find some other like random type of work I could do. Um, it's like moving for your job, like being active for your job, channeling your creativity, like the role the music plays, and just all these like identity pieces that come with it that are both internal and external, because I'm like, this is how I'm kind of like known within this community too. And it is like a loss of community, even if you aren't necessarily like hanging out with the girls outside of work, it's still like a social aspect that you lose as well in a time that's
Yeah.
like already very isolating.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, speak about I'd love to hear your opinions on like the isolating aspect of it, because like even you were saying like you don't even know many people that have young children right now, and also just like the whole FOMO aspect of it and the constant comparisons to you and other dancers, you and other pole dancers and stuff too, like you can feel really, really, really alone when you're pregnant.
Yes. I definitely did feel that way. I was really like, especially once I announced my pregnancy, like in the second trimester, I found out several pole dancers were pregnant at the same time as me, like that I was
Oh my
just
God.
acquainted with, like no one else in Calgary. And to be able to like
Mhm.
connect with them and chat with them through the pregnancy has been invaluable. And there's one girl in Calgary who is a retired dancer, and her daughter's like almost, oh, I think 2 years old, and she retired after having her daughter. But
Mhm.
I still see her as a dancer, and I think she does too. Like how I was talking about how even if you're not doing something, it's still like part of you. And so I
Totally.
would like go meet her for coffee and hang out with her and her daughter. And it was so to be able to connect not just with another pregnant person or not just another mom, but someone who has the same background. Like I think
Mhm.
I really needed that. And that was something like I could Google like first trimester, like is so terrible or isolated when pregnant or whatever you want to read on the blogs or the forums. And there was always
Yeah.
something missing because I'm like, they may feel the similar way, but they're still working. They're still working their like their job until their maternity leave. So they're not losing that income. Or like every woman has
Right.
these body image issues, but they're not thinking I want to be back in that bikini X amount of time postpartum. Like there's just another element to it for me that
Mhm.
is not as common. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And the FOMO, you said the FOMO. So I'm not like proud of this, but it is what it is. I had to pretty much mute every stripper I followed on Instagram. Not unfollow, just mute because I just was not like mentally strong enough to see them like promoting themselves at work, see their new costumes, see like the
Yeah.
club started filming these beautiful promo reels of like their stage girls and that were so like glamorous and cool. And then also seeing um, stage girls like always, it seemed like they're leveling up, which is so amazing. And we love to see it. But I'm just being
Yeah.
perfectly candid. When you feel or when I feel like I'm just slipping back, it's not a jealousy thing. It's just like an insecurity, I guess,
Mhm.
to just be perfectly honest, where I'm like, my body's changing. I don't know how it's gonna land on the other side. I'm
Yeah.
not losing my pole skills necessarily, but taking a huge step back from pole training. Going to have to work back to that. I don't know if my
Mhm.
costumes are going to fit after. Everyone
Right.
like looks so beautiful and I'm just feeling like frumpy like mom to be. So it was just I just couldn't really see it
Yeah.
um on Instagram because yeah, just comparing yourself and then feeling kind of like disempowered too, like you can't even do anything like to change your situation at
Mhm.
the time. In pregnancy, you really just have to like surrender. So
Yeah.
that's been kind of hard. And then yeah, sometimes I would log into my stripper Instagram because I haven't really been using that Instagram to like
Mhm.
trigger myself apparently because I would go and like look through everyone's posts and be like, "Oh my god, why did I do that?"
No.
But yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's so hard, and like I really applaud you for being so raw with this and being super transparent, because like this is often a perspective that we don't hear of, and this is your own way of coping with this, because everyone has their own ways of coping through, whether it's FOMO, whether it's even just like regular comparison, no matter what kind of sex work that you got to do what is best for you and what is healthy for your mind. Um, because sometimes that shit can like just eat you up inside, and you're already like, you don't want to further isolate yourself either. So I think it's healthy what you're doing, and like a good thing as well. And maybe this is a mechanism that other people can adopt as well if they're going through something similar. So you got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah, and you always hear like mental health advocates will say like sometimes you have to get off social media or you have to
Yeah.
just unfollow accounts. And it's not about them. It's not what they're posting. It's about you, how it's impacting you, right? So it doesn't mean anything other than, just making some boundaries around social media, I guess. But um, yeah. definitely
Smart. It's smart.
it's challenging.
Oh,
And like sometimes I would say to my husband, I'm like, I just miss stripping so much. And
mm-hmm.
he gets it, but he doesn't get it, right? But he's like, yeah. And
Yeah.
he's totally like the question of me going back was never like, it was not something we had to discuss. He's like, of course, go back to dancing like after. I do intend to, but I really don't know like when or exactly how that will look. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I probably won't be traveling, or at least like not with nearly the same frequency.
Yeah.
And I really don't know when. Like I just can't put like a timeline on myself in advance or an expectation. I'm really just going to have to like see how it goes.
Yeah.
Um, but I do really want, not just for the money, like even if I could get another like job that would support me adequately, I need like a little bit more time on the stage and like back in the heels, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's going to be a really interesting time because, as you mentioned, that's something you can't really plan. And I also think it might be unhealthy for you to be like, okay, I have to be back in the club by this time. I have to look good in this outfit. I have to fit into my costumes and like putting that unnecessary pressure on yourself. Because I think that is kind of unfair because you really want to be able to enjoy your time with your newborn and also like of course, as much as you want to get back to the club, it's just like you don't know how you're going to feel. You don't even know when you're going to have your baby. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a lot of unknowns. And like, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to ask you personally, like, how are you dealing and coping with so much unknown? Oh, hello, we got the dogs in here.
Yeah, just a little bark there. Yeah, so coping with like the unknown and the uncontrollable is really hard. And like, of course, control in our lives is an illusion, really at any time. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. I definitely do. And yeah, there's so much in pregnancy. There's a lot you can do to try to like optimize things or whatever, but like ultimately you really do have to surrender. Like I even with pull, I thought, oh, maybe I'll be able to pull like all the way through, but I couldn't control my abs separating at like 20
Yeah.
weeks or whatever, and it just not really being like safe or like a good idea for me to continue. And so I had to like
Mm-hmm.
really release that. Um,
Really?
oh, and now it's funny because like coming into my due date, that like coping with the unknown, I've done so much preparation to try to have like a certain type of birth. And then even
Mm-hmm.
my doula and my midwives are like, you can't control this. And I'm like, I know. That's why I'm stressed out. Have to remind me that I can't control it. So I don't really know how I'm coping with it. But um, one thing that I wanted to say that has helped me like cope with or like so initially stop having to leave the club for X amount of time felt like an identity loss. And same with like stopping training
Mm-hmm.
pole felt like a loss. But when I
Yeah.
said I'm trying to really see it as an identity shift, what has helped
Mm-hmm.
that is actually leaning into becoming a mom. And that's actually what helped me
Mm.
want to have kids in the first place was like listening to really positive stories of motherhood like on my podcasts and stuff that I would listen to and like focusing on the potential there and like so as the pregnancy progressed it got easier like once you start
Mhm.
feeling baby move and like you start
Yeah.
building your registry assembling all the things taking your birth classes and it just becomes more and more real and you really I've really been able to tap into something that feels like very maternal and really like genuine
Wow.
and I'm very very excited like about our baby and about seeing Sky or my husband Sky become a dad and like just everything to come. And there's just a lot of unknowns there too and like fear. And sometimes even when I see in public a toddler having like big feelings or like having a meltdown, I'm like, oh my God, what have we done? Because it just seems like a nightmare. But my husband's a really positive thinker and he always reframes. He's like, oh, when the dogs have like a bad day at the dog park and they get in a little altercation with the dogs or they do something bad and you love them like 1 second later. He's like, it's going to be the same with your kid. And I'm like, that's true. So yeah, like as much as I like still, it pains me and I like miss the club, like trying to like really lean into this other role, not to the extent that it will like cancel the other one out, has helped me think that it's just like a shift and not like a loss outright, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I love how you were able to define that as well, because, like, like when you use the term like identity loss, it just sounds like a death, like a like a
Mm-hmm.
funeral, like very negative and stuff too. But by using the term shift, like it seems like a lateral move, that you're kind
Mm-hmm.
of shifting into a different, or like transitioning into a different part of your life, which is basically what's happening too. And like I
Mm-hmm.
think that is a really good change in perspective, because sometimes you need that. And it really sounds like you're starting to really embrace motherhood, because that's coming real soon for you, which is
Mm-hmm.
super exciting.
Yeah, and like you do have to still be willing to maybe let things go to an extent. Like I did have a moment of like really feeling like I was grieving the traveling stripper lifestyle because I don't really think I will ever have that exact life again. Even if I was to like work out of town, it's still not going to be the same as before, where I didn't really have to think. I would just like make my bookings. My husband didn't question it. He would just take care of the dogs while I was gone. I knew they were safe, but like I wasn't considering like another human being who like I
Yeah.
mean personally I don't even think I'm going to want to leave my baby. I think I'm going to be one of those like he's my baby, like kind of parents where I probably won't even be able to go on a date night. That's just how I anticipate I will be. So I just knew like that feeling of like hitting the road on my own and like having all that downtime and alone time in the dancer accommodation or whatever, and like just these little aspects of that traveling dancer lifestyle I think even if it comes back it's going to look so different. So you do still
Hmm.
have to let things go, and you
Right.
can be sad about it, so
Yeah.
um and even like the idea of like women getting their body back, like um it's never going to be exactly the same, right? And
Yes.
so you kind of have to like let that go as well. And you can still be like goal oriented or whatever, but
Hmm.
yeah. But yeah, I like what you said
Yeah.
about
No.
yeah, it being a lateral movement instead of like a hard stop like loss, right?
Totally. And it's very humanizing to feel these things, because it's just a natural thing, right? So like I think it's important that you are embracing this, and embracing this new chapter, because like I can kind of, well, I can't compare because I'm not pregnant, but like it's kind of like comparing myself to how I was in like my 20s, like my late 20s, when I was like traveling around the world and like doing my thing. And then now that I'm in my 30s, like it's like looking a little bit different. Or even like recently, like looking at when things shut down for the pandemic, and I was like really on my high gear of like doing many many competitions internationally, and just like on that upward trajectory, and then having that all shift and change, and having to kind of reflect on how I am changing, and that my life is looking a little bit different now, and being okay with that. And that takes like a lot of time and getting used to. And like, I think it's important to just kind of welcome it with open arms, which I think you're doing beautifully. So it's an exciting time.
I'm articulating it beautifully, but it's definitely been like an up and down, But no, I know
Hmm.
what you mean. Like it's all I call it like a nostalgia for like our own life, but like
Yeah.
not our childhood. Like it could even be like 2 years ago. Like 2019, I still say I'm like, that was the best year of my life. And I just like miss how it was because I competed so many times. I was like stripping full time all year. So I like money was not an issue. We were like traveling concerts, and I just like, it's like the golden year, and you compare yourself to like your level of fitness, what you're achieving at that time, and just how all these things looked. And even if you have another great year of your life, it never looks the same. And it can be hard.
It definitely can be hard. I've definitely been there before, so I know exactly what you mean by that. But I mean, this is a really, really inspiring, cool chapter. Like, as a person that would love to have a family one day, like, this is really comforting to hear. And I just really, really appreciate your super raw and candid approach to pregnancy, especially like as a dancer and as a like pole competitor as well. So it's just been really, really eye opening, and I have loved this conversation so much. So thank you, Jenna.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I just thought of something. I had these crazy, this is just off topic, but like everyone hears about pregnancy dreams, where like it's kind of women can have like more vivid dreams. And I already like have crazy dreams, but I have had multiple dreams about going to work in the club, but like pregnant. Like I will dream this, like, oh, one more booking. And I like thought in my dream, I'm like, I thought, oh, I can hide it. Like, I'll just wear like a garter belt. I'll just suck in. And then in the dream, I'm backstage and I'm like, I cannot hide it. Like, what was I thinking? Like, this is so like, oh my God. And then I'll like miss my show or something, or I'm on stage. I like can't get up the pole. Like, I've had like 3 or 4 dreams like that of like trying to work at the club, but like as pregnant as I am in real life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yes. So clearly it still like weighs on my mind, I guess. It's so funny. And like usually if you have a dream about work, it's already like a dystopia, right? Like it's never like usually a good dream. It's always like something is not right here. But yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That's hilarious. Jenna, before I let you go, we do have a few questions that came in from the audience. And yes, I'm really excited to kind of go into this as well, because as a nerdy pole dancer, a lot of these are pole dancing focused questions, but I'm excited to go into them with you. So let's hop into that section of the show. So the first one is handspring during pregnancy. How? In exclamation question marks, many of those.
This is a really interesting question because so the last handspring I did was at 37 weeks. So 2 weeks ago, I was like, should I do one? Maybe it'll like induce labor like today, but I don't know if I will.
God.
But so I can't do anything else. I can't do a fan kick. I can't do a fireman spin. Like I can, but it causes that abdominal coning. I don't know how much people know about that, but when your abs separate. Yeah, when your abs start separating, like your 6-pack abs start separating to make room for the baby, if you do like core engagement, like think like shoulder plank, invert, pike, whatever, plank, it like makes a pyramid because all the pressure is like pushing through the fascia in between your abs. And that is not good because that makes the fascia like super stretched out and it doesn't come back together properly after. So everything by like 26 weeks, I swear to God, everything, even a fan kick, everything was causing that coning except handsprings. And I think twisted grip handspring, because I think it's the push pull. Like you're locked in, like that suspension bridge tension between your straight arms, and you're using momentum and the trajectory. It's not like a pike where you're folding your legs up towards you like a crunch. It's not a crunch. It's like through your obliques. It's like a sideways kind of like transverse movement. Right. And then when you're in the top, when you're in the Aisha, especially in a twisted grip, it's kind of just physics at that point, right? Like it's that push pull through your arms, and you're not like holding a crunch the way you are with like a shoulder mount or something.
That makes sense.
So that's my theory, like of like why I could still do it. And of course, like that was like, it's one of those moves that is just very, very accessible for me at this point because I've done it so much. And my body just like knows like that pattern through the air to like land in that Aisha. And like, I mean, if you were still kind of learning it and you became pregnant, I probably wouldn't recommend continuing to do it. But Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of
That's
my
your trick.
only, yes, but like everyone's different, right? But that's just the only
Totally.
thing one of the only things I could still access without that coning.
Right.
When I did
Yeah.
it at 37 weeks, I was a little sketched out. I almost was like, I need a spot, but I was home alone. And I just did it anyway. But I'm like, I don't really want my ego to let me take that risk right now. So,
Well, thank you for the really detailed and like physiological explanation. I'm sure this person will definitely enjoy that because this person is a pretty big pole dancer too. So in our community. The second question is something similar, but how did you manage to maintain your Iron X so far into your pregnancy?
well, I only made it to 24 weeks with the Iron X, and a pole dancer in Chicago who is now a mom of two, just had her second child, did an Iron X once a week until 39 weeks with both pregnancies. She just
Oh
made
my
like a photo
God.
book out of it for herself.
Wow.
So she was my inspiration, and I've been chatting with her all through my pregnancy. She's amazing. She's actually going to be on my podcast, so stay tuned for that.
Yes.
I interviewed
Can't
her.
wait.
But again, like it's it has to be something you've trained a lot. Like it shouldn't be
Mhm.
something that you're just starting to work on, and then you would not want to like keep doing that through your pregnancy. Um, but I think it's just the muscles involved, like the types of core muscles involved. It's really more like your transverse, your obliques, a lot through your arms and lats. So if those muscles are like already built up, um, yeah, like you're getting heavier, right? So it is getting harder to
Mhm.
hold for sure as the weeks go on. Um, but yeah, like I couldn't have shoulder mounted that long just because the different types of muscles it uses. Um,
Right.
so I don't know. I don't really have, and twisted grip. I mean, like once you got your solid twisted grip, it's kind of like it's not that it's a cheat, but it makes like certain things easier, right?
Easier. Yeah.
Um, yeah, once you're like locked in through your shoulders. So I don't know. I could have maybe tried to push it a few more weeks. I wish, and yeah, I was sad that I had to like kind of stop
Oh.
pole dancing altogether around that time. But again, I'd
Mhm.
rather miss it than resent it.
Yeah.
So
I love that
yeah.
statement. Definitely stealing that.
Hmm.
The last question here is, were you ever scared or felt uneasy slash unsafe while you were instructing or even on stage?
Like while I was pregnant or just in general?
I would assume while you're pregnant, since I did advertise this
Yeah.
episode being about pregnancy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Um, yeah. So I wasn't on stage very much when I was pregnant, literally for like less than a full week of work. Um,
Mhm.
Definitely, though, once I knew I was pregnant, I wasn't like scared, but I do feel like I just naturally toned it down a little bit. And then
Mhm.
throughout my entire first trimester, I was still teaching and taking advanced classes. So I didn't really modify pole at all, like up until about 16 weeks. I was still doing like advanced. But
Mhm.
I did feel like a little bit more chicken, like certain things
Mhm.
like butterfly flip and especially when I would take someone else's advanced class, there was just certain things where I'm like, I'm just not going to do it. You know, I have like a
Yeah.
fear factor with anything flippy in pole because I just like,
Yeah.
especially backwards flips, I cannot get my body, like my mind wrapped around that like trajectory of movement.
Yeah.
And so pretty much like if I felt like I needed to have a spot, I wasn't going to do it. Like if I felt like that
Mhm.
uneasy about trying something, I kind of wouldn't like push myself to try it. Um, Other than that, I did not feel unsafe. I felt frustrated as my physical
Mhm.
limitations became kind of like more and more apparent. But yeah, because I know some people do worry about like the safety of pole dancing during pregnancy. And yeah, you have to like know your body and like just, yeah, don't do anything you think you might fall out of if you're pregnant,
Yeah.
even early in your pregnancy. So because I've just logged like a lot of hours on the pole, like between teaching and especially what I said earlier about performing. You get so many hours on the pole. You're not necessarily learning new tricks all the time, but the tricks and combos that you're familiar with, you can like do them in your sleep. Like if you're doing them on stage, like freestyling, they're just like in your body. So doing stuff like that, like you'll know if it feels safe or not. So yeah.
Yeah. Good sound advice. Don't do anything, I don't want to say stupid, but some things can be like tricky decisions.
Yeah.
Make good
like
decisions.
Honestly, I would say if you're pregnant, like don't even do something that you need a spot for. Like it's not the time to like learn a new trick that like requires you to be spotted through it. Like just keep practicing what you know, try out some new combos, maybe new transitions, but not like learning like new dynamic moves and stuff, you know, because it's, you know, like a fall off the pole can be pretty serious. And it's not that common. Like literally falling completely off the pole, I feel like it's not that common. It's more like you bail out, like you mess up the move or something, or just you get stuck or something. But yeah, anything where it's going to end up on like Dan Rosen's pole LOLs page, like don't do that while you're pregnant.
Good sound advice, Jenna. But before I let you go, where can people find you?
So on Instagram, Jenna Elissa Pole. Yeah, that's my main Instagram. It's been not a ton of new content, mostly still have some maternity photo shoot stuff that I've been posting, but yeah, hopefully I'm very active on my stories on there, even though I don't have as much to post on my feed lately. But hopefully if you want to see my postpartum return, I don't know what it's going to look like. And then, yeah, if you want to follow my podcast, it's the Dancer Mama Podcast. So that's the Instagram for that. And yeah, if you want to hear more about my kind of real-time journey, like through motherhood, and then also hear some other perspectives on it, then that'll be there.
Yes. Yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe to Jenna's podcast. It's really interesting. Even if you're not pregnant, like even for myself, I found it to be really, truly fascinating and a perspective that like I would never really have heard of before. So go give her a follow and a like and a listen and all the things that you have to do. And likewise, you should also probably be doing the same for mine. So for Stripped by Sia, it's new episodes every single Sunday. It's on pretty much every single platform out there. I would love and appreciate if you followed or subscribed to the show. Writing reviews, super helpful as well for accessibility and visibility. So feel free to rate as you like. I usually like 5 stars, but whatever you like, whatever you're comfortable with. And it's Stripped by Sia on Instagram, Stripped by Sia on Twitter, and patreon.com/Stripped by Sia if you want to try and help the podcast monetarily as well. So, but for the time being, Jenna, it was a pleasure to finally have you on. I'm so glad we can make this happen. So
yeah, thank you so much for having me.
You were so welcome, and we'll have to hear an update once the baby comes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
All right. Bye. You're listening to Stripped by Sia, hosted, produced, and edited by Steph Sia. Music by Ted D. Graphic design by Maria Bellandarama, and photography by Ian Dabrin.